So the last session for the day should be very short, actually, because I think between Mark, Tinka, and I, we are standing between you and the social. So it's a hard place to be. So the next session will be about the tools that you can actually use to improve peering on your network, to rather show people that you're peering. And I'm going to invite Mark Tinka to actually present about the PeeringDB and the role of a peering coordinator. So basically, assuming up to this point in time, you've sort of seen whether you actually do this on a day-to-day basis and you didn't know you are potentially qualified to be a peering coordinator, or you don't have somebody who actually does this on your network. And so it needs to be done, and you need a peering coordinator. So in that case, then you need to know what's the role of that peering coordinator, and what are some of the tools that are available on the internet that a lot of the peering coordinators use to talk to other peering coordinators, or to find other networks that they can peer with, in addition to what we've learned over the course of today or discussed over the course of today. So with Mark, you have the floor.
Thanks, Michuki. Good evening, good afternoon, rather. My name is Mark Tinka. I'm with SEACOM, and I'll be talking today about PeeringDB and the role of peering coordinators in the peering ecosystem we've been discussing most of today and for the rest of the week. We'll look at what the PeeringDB actually is, what it is not, how you can use it as an operator, the team behind the PeeringDB, and of course we'll go into a bit of a demo just to show you exactly what happens behind the scenes. So what is a PeeringDB? The PeeringDB is a solution to a problem. And the problems have been such that as an operator, when you begin to grow your network, you hear about peering. Peering is good. So the questions are, how do you know where to peer? There are so many locations in different parts of the world, in different countries, different data centers, different towns, cities. How do you know where to peer? That's a good question. How do you know with whom you want to peer? And vice versa, will they want to peer with you? Some networks are a bit restrictive about who they choose, and you might be as well. And also, how do you know when new peers appear at exchange points, at data centers, and so forth? Because networks are always coming and going. Some grow, some fail, some get bought over, some sell. So how do you know about all this information as it happens around you? So many operators and many operations have drawn up lists about this kind of detail. The issue with that is those lists tend to scale very poorly. And obviously the person who's drawn them up tends to leave the company, then it falls over and dies. There's a large amount of information that needs to propagate, and because of that, it's hard to update over time. And the amount of information that networks provide as part of their peering details varies between them. Some networks will provide a significant amount of detail about routing policy and so forth, others not so much. So there's a vast amount of detail that's difficult to capture in a simple spreadsheet or a simple notepad. So enter the PeeringDB. The PeeringDB is essentially an open system, freely available to operators around the world, that is basically a central repository for all this kind of information: locations, peers, IP address information at exchange points, amount of bandwidth that's been used, and so on and so forth. And it also provides an easy way to search for peers at various locations around the world. And that right there is the URL. At the end of this slide deck, I'll show you a bit of a demo. So just to get that out of the way, PeeringDB is not a place for you to find customers. So we like to share in this environment. So as an engineer, I'll share my login details with my sales folks and so on and so forth. But it's not a place for them or for anyone else to send unsolicited email to other members at the PeeringDB, because then it could easily put that operation in poor standing with the community and potentially ban you from the PeeringDB. Okay? You can't pay the PeeringDB to keep you there. Well, you could, but they're not obligated to take your money. So it's not a sales funnel. Let's not mine data from the PeeringDB as much as there is. And how can you use the PeeringDB? Now, as a form of interaction, the PeeringDB is a very simple web-based interface, as we shall see shortly. What would happen is that when you're interested in joining the PeeringDB community, you would send an email to the team that maintain the PeeringDB. I'll show you a list of their names shortly. An account will initially be created for you that will be in read-only mode. The reason for this is they need to verify that you are who you say you are. You could be just someone else from somewhere claiming to be an ISP or an operator trying to get valuable information so you can send spam to operators. Now, if you use your email address for work, validation tends to go much faster. So don't go so-and-so at yahoo.com. It's great. Or gmail.com. It's good. It will just take a little bit more time. All right? And again, the team is not paid. It's all volunteer-based, as we shall see, so you can't really rush them. They have day jobs as well. So again, use an email address for work. It will make things smoother. In terms of use, well, like we said, many operators around the world have now begun to use the PeeringDB as the default location in which to house peering information. It's very likely that if you ask anybody here to peer with you, they will make a search on this PeeringDB to look for you and see exactly what it is you are, what it is you're offering, where you are, and so forth. So it's important and vital that that information in the PeeringDB always remains up to date. All right? Most people will trust that as opposed to an email from you saying what you do. To that end, we do not encourage laziness when you are working with the PeeringDB. Keep it up to date as much as possible. And as we have seen a couple of hours previously today, try not to forget your login details. It seems to be happening all the time. Okay? So if your NOC number changes, your email address changes, your NOC email address changes, the person who does your routing policy moves on, update that information. Because anybody who's serious about peering with you will most likely check that. So, in the same vein, an organization, an operator, would typically need to have somebody called a peering coordinator. So the peering coordinator is essentially somebody that's dedicated to handling all matters peering. So, where do I go to peer? Who looks at the Arbor output, or what Martin was talking about earlier this morning, the net flow data, to decide where to peer? With whom do I peer? What will it cost? Who handles the cross-connect charges? Will there be an agreement? What's the long-term strategy? Do we upgrade to a 10 gig port, 100 gig port? All those kinds of details. You have a dedicated person, typically called a peering coordinator. And unfortunately, most operations don't have this dedicated person because then, for various reasons, budget or lack of it, or maybe no long-term plan in having somebody that's dedicated doing this. So what will happen is you have your network engineers and your systems engineers doubling as peering coordinators, which works okay. But when you get serious about peering, as we attend more of these meetings, you will see that it takes a lot more effort and time to get peering done. So this person will essentially go out into the world, attend meetings like these, look for peering information, update his PeeringDB details, and essentially maintain the peering relationships between his operation and the others they're interested in. So if you don't have a peering coordinator today, think about getting one as soon as you can, because the peering game is not a simple one. Most peering happens by handshakes. Some don't. It takes a while. So you want somebody who is dedicated, sitting on it day in and day out. The PeeringDB is easy to interact with. There are multiple interfaces. There is a finger service, I'll have you know. There is a WHOIS service at the PeeringDB. You can also query across the network to a MySQL database at the PeeringDB. And obviously the easiest one is an open URL that you can query as well to get information about peers. Okay, so multiple ways you can interact with the system from your computer. The PeeringDB, we said, is 100% volunteer-driven. It's now an organization that has been incorporated in 2011. Donations run the system. Donated hardware, donated connectivity by Service Central. And for those of you who know Richard Steenbergen, he is the gentleman that actually created the system originally. He does have some help, however, and many of you might know some or all of these folks. And this is essentially the team who have day jobs that run the PeeringDB. All right. And we shall skip into a demo. There's nothing like the real thing. I don't know if that's clear enough. Is it big enough? Is it big enough? It's all right. How do I do Windows? Sorry, it's a Windows machine, so. Too big? Let's try 100. Let's try and size it down just a little. Okay, it's not too bad. Thank you. Yeah, so when you log into the PeeringDB website, you will land on this homepage. This homepage is a summary of activity. As you can see here, it will tell you the last 15 updated participants. So these are not necessarily new participants. These are participants who've updated their details in that time period. Maybe they've added an exchange point. Maybe they have increased bandwidth. Maybe they have updated policy, whatever. So when you log in, you'll see that. You'll also see up there summary about total number of peering networks, public exchange points, unique presences, and so on and so forth. It's a lot of detail there. All right. When you go to peering record here, this is essentially where you input your data and your information. So as you can see here, name of the company, AS number, an AS set, if you use that with any of the registries, an alias, company website, type of network that you are, approximate amount of traffic levels. Some people will disclose this, others won't. If you have a looking glass, you could mention that there. If you have a peering policy, you could include that there. Whether you peer with unicast, multicast, or IPv6, peering policies, contacts, and so forth, and then locations here. So locations here include both public and private locations. Public locations tend to be exchange points, while private locations would tend to also be exchange points or data centers. Okay. So it's not only hosting data about exchange points, but also about data centers where you can interconnect privately with another network. You can define the amount of traffic, or sorry, the bandwidth you use or have at a facility, or the exchange point, IP addresses, and so on that you use for peering. You can also search. There's a great search functionality here. You can look for network types. You can look for traffic levels, you can look for ratios, you can look for ASNs, and so on and so forth. There's a list of exchange points. There's a full list of all the exchange points that are known in the system. And each day you get, I'm sure you get a new addition. Facilities, again, these are data centers around the world. Full list included as well. And a lot of other good details. Now, the easiest way for you to check the PS details, for instance, would be, who can we pick on? Let's see. We'll pick on Mike. So we'll pick on Mike AS15169 dot PeeringDB dot com. So if you put that in the URL, oops, Windows, AS15169 dot. Okay, so if you do that, it will automatically load up the AS number that you've queried, and you'll see all the details there that belong to Mike. Google, Inc., YouTube, double-click, so forth, AS number, AS set, approximate prefixes, and so forth. All the locations here where he appears. Mind you, that's not the end. You can go to page 2. There'll be more, and all the way up to the last. Other private facilities where he appears, and so on and so forth. Basic public policy there. General public policy there. And obviously, contact information down here in case you should want to peer with Google, for example. All right. So this is how the PeeringDB is very useful and very simple to use. Someone comes up to you and says, I want to peer, you don't know who they are, you look them up. If they don't have an entry in PeeringDB, you might assume they aren't a serious player, so you won't peer with them anyway. Nonetheless, for this crowd here, this is a good resource to add to your tools of the trade. Open your peering account now with the PeeringDB. Thank you.
Questions for Mark? No questions for Mark? Was it that simple and straightforward? How many networks here are actually on the PeeringDB? Wow. Okay. Let me revise that. You're an African network, and you're on the PeeringDB. Fewer hands. So we need to get all the other networks that are here onto the PeeringDB, hopefully by the end. Is it possible for you to get on by the end of the Peering Forum? Can you do this again on Friday and see whether we'll have more hands up in terms of the numbers of networks from Africa on the PeeringDB? Are there any PeeringDB admins in the room?
If there aren't PeeringDB admins and you need stuff put through on PeeringDB, because some of that stuff, the initial stuff, needs to go through admin, and that can take time.
Well, I think we have a contact here who knows somebody within the PeeringDB.
I can talk to people and get that process smoothed out. So if you aren't registering on PeeringDB and you need stuff, I think myself or either of the guys next to me actually know people involved in PeeringDB, on #IX. So you can speak to any of us and we will talk to the right people and see if we can't speed things up a bit.
Okay, so please remind me to check this on Friday afternoon, how many people have gotten onto the PeeringDB. All right, last but not least is me. I don't have much to say, but actually you have a lot to do. Now,